Welcome to a new edition of the Neon Jazz interview series with New York-based jazz trumpeter, arranger, composer, educator, producer, and bandleader Ben Bierman. He opened up about his 2019 CD, Some Takes on the Blues. It's a great CD. This New York City journeyman has had a wide range of musical experiences, an eclectic aesthetic sensibility to match. As a trumpet player, he has performed and recorded with diverse artists like B.B. King, Robert Cray, Stevie Ray Vaughn, Archie Shepp, and so many others. He is an associate professor in the Department of Art and Music at John Jay College of Criminal Justice at City University of New York. He's got great stories, so get to know him and dig this interview, my friends.
Hey, Ben, thanks for taking a minute out for Neon Jazz. I appreciate it.
Bill, it's my great pleasure. Thanks a lot.
Absolutely. So let's dive right in here and talk about Some Takes on the Blues. It's a great CD. I've had a great time listening to this. I want to know what kind of vibe, what kind of artistic vision you were trying to capture with this release.
That's an interesting question. If I might turn it around for a second. When I go hear music with people who aren't musicians and we walk outside and they always want to know what I think, and I always ask them, what do you think? What do you hear? What do you hear when you hear it, Joe?
Well, the interesting thing about this album is that, you know, blues is a precursor to a lot of the American music modes that we have come accustomed to and we love, like jazz. And it's like the original protest music. And what I hear jazz musicians doing and what I hear in this album is it's celebrating this music that really is cross-genre, and it's really kind of not, I wouldn't say in a cliche way it's blurring the lines, but I would say that it's really heralding it in your own perception, your own take on how you want this music to be celebrated. I see it as a celebration, and it's very evident with the voice that's come through on this.
Well, I really appreciate that. It means a lot to me, and people have been telling me as I play it, like just for example, down the hall, the super in my building, right? He's a music lover and a DJ, and of course I gave it to him, and he had a party, and I went over to the party, and he was playing it, and people are reacting very positively, like you said. It's like it's celebratory. It's fun. You know, my sister put it on her phone. I was sitting there, and she just couldn't stop smiling. Those things make me really happy. It is a celebration. I've been around a long time. I've been doing this a long time. Really, the blues was the first music that really got me going as a musician. I grew up in Haight-Ashbury in San Francisco. Spent my time, you know, I'm 65. I was born in 1954. So the mid-60s, I was right in the middle of all that music in San Francisco. And I'd be at the Fillmore all the time, and even as a kid. And I sat there, and I guess like a friend of mine who's on the record, actually, Andy Reese, guitar player from Nashville guitar player, we grew up together. And it just turned us into musicians. You know, we were playing already, but it just excited us. It's always been there in my life. It started me off, and then my life took all kinds of twists and turns. You know, I spent time on the road playing the blues, you know, playing on the Chitlin circuit, playing with all the great people that I had listened to. It was like a dream. Then I went on to do all kinds of stuff, trying to make a living, supporting my family as a musician, which is never easy, super challenging, right? Kind of got away from stuff. I just was so busy trying to make a living, you know? And in a way, with this record, I kind of got back to myself, honestly. So when you tell me that, you know, you hear it as a celebration, to me that's a multi-layered comment that really means a lot to me. People seem to be reacting that way to it. And you know, I'm just so excited to get it out and see what else happens with it. It's super exciting.
Well, and I guess that comes back to what you had said about having ties to Kansas City. You know, there's definitely there's a level of blues, and there's obviously jazz. So before we get into kind of some aspects of your early life leading up to now, talk to me a little bit about your Kansas City connection.
Yeah, well, I haven't been there for a long time. It's been I guess 79 was the last time I was there. I have, you know, and I have people I know out there, but I just haven't been. But I spent quite a bit of time on the road, and one thing that I did was play in a Midwest Territory band. It wasn't like wasn't like Walter Page or Count Basie. It was more like kind of like almost like a Guy Lombardo kind of thing, playing the Midwest ballroom circuit, which was very alive. And we played 7 nights a week in a big bus, kind of a small big band, and we were touring every night, running up and down from Chicago down to Texas and the whole middle of the country. And we would stop through Kansas City, and we'd play downtown. Like I haven't been back, but the city felt alive. It felt alive, and it's I had always related one of the early things an early tune I loved was Rollin' Pete, which is a Barrel House, Kansas City boogie woogie. It's the sound always sat with me, and I. It's funny. I love boogie woogie, and I haven't played too much of it lately. I don't think my chops are up for boogie woogie right now, but I did it a lot as a kid, and I went to study with very well-known piano. I played piano from the time I was a kid, and I studied with a guy named Wally Rose. Wally Rose was a wonderful pianist who was a top kind of New Orleans style musician in San Francisco, playing with Turk Murphy, one of the top jazz bands out there at the time, and he became a wonderful classical pianist. And I studied with him, and I wanted to study the blues and boogie woogie with him, and he was so annoyed at me because he wanted to teach me, Gershwin and Chopin, and I was trying to play boogie woogie, but that was just a sound that meant a lot to me. And the Kansas City blues sound is its own thing. It has its own sound. Think about Charlie Parker. He had such an incredible feeling for the blues. No one has, and it's his own feeling for the blues. If you compare it to, say, the way Dizzy plays the blues, it's just totally different, right?
Yeah.
And so Bird he had this sound, and in a way, I guess, kind of just thinking aloud, with his record, I managed to put my sound out, and you speak to musicians all the time. 581 interviews you have right now, probably more by now, and it's not easy to find your sound. We struggle with this. Most of us struggle with this our entire lives.
Yeah.
Do you get that from people?
Oh, yeah. And I think the interesting thing about it is that it's almost like musicians are doctors. There's this almost a God complex. And this is what I mean by that is that, when you go into a doctor, you expect that they're going to diagnose, find it, fix it, and let you go. And you expect that out of a musician when you see them live. It's interesting you turned the tables on me in the beginning, and you should. And I'm glad you did. It's one of the few times it's been done. But as the listener that likes this idiom, I always find that you guys make this very easy. So when I start as an interviewer, preening back these layers of who you are and what you are, I don't like to get into speaking about sheet music and specifics of notes and this and that. I want to know who you are behind who you are, which is why I want to have more of a unique spin on the musician. But at the end of the day, you make it seem so easy, so we just assume you have it all together. You have everything put together. You've spent all this time, and what I find out, not only from what I go through, but from what I read of other people, like even Miles Davis, it took him decades to get to that point. It really did. And for someone like Charlie Parker, it almost took that accident on the way to the Ozarks for him to have a life and death situation, along with the cymbal being dropped on stage, for him to be like, you know what? I have to get my voice out, and I need to do it now, because this is not a place where they're going to wait around for me. And anyway, I kind of went around and around, but yeah, I think it takes a long time for you to find your voice, and I think it's metaphoric of us as human beings, because it takes a long time for us to figure out, probably before, during, or after our midlife crisis, to figure out who we really are, and how we got where we're at. So
yeah, I couldn't agree more. You know, you kind of said it better than me. I guess this comes after me. This was maybe my second midlife crisis. You know, they I think they say that. You know, my middle son. I have three grown sons, a couple grandkids, and my middle son is very spiritual person and a spiritual activist. He talks about Saturn. You know, I'm not an astrology person, but he is. He's just into all kinds of things. And you have these Saturn returns, and he's pointed out to me where my Saturn returns are, you know, and they have big effects in your life. And you know, actually, this, you know, now that you're saying it, we're both kind of going along the same tack with different words. You know, this was a long time coming.
Yeah.
You know, and it was a long time coming, and I was just texting with a friend. I was sending out save the date invitations this morning. I'm really gearing up for a release party just at home. I'm having it at home on March 15th. He's a wonderfully young, mid-30s scholar and musician who I love talking to, and we share a lot of thoughts and stuff. And he was asking me what I would say now at 65 that I wish I knew at 35, you know. And, of course, that's a huge question, and probably have lots of things to say about it. You know, and I responded, I told him what I thought, but I also said, you know, this stuff is so hard. You know, it's so hard to do anything really well. And then when you're in a economically challenging field, it's even harder. And then I said to him, hey, man, this stuff, this is just really hard, and it's really lonely. And I get depressed a lot of times. Not a lot, but sometimes. You know, sometimes I feel great. Things are going great. Other times, you know, it's hard. And when I was young, as a young musician in San Francisco, I had a nonette that I was writing compositions for, arrangements and compositions. It was a good group. And I think I kind of didn't know how good it was. And people were starting to come around and listen to it. And good people were coming and wanting to sit in. Top people were coming. And people were asking me to write arrangements for them and bring them in. And things were going really well. And I started getting some work. My mentor, Trumpeter John Coppola, turning me on to work, and I was finding work. And almost the worst thing that ever happened to me as a musician was realizing I could make a living playing the trumpet. Oh. Because I got so caught up. And then here I am trying to make a living as a trumpet player. And that's hard, you know.
Yeah.
And I raised my family that way. And man, it was hard. And I don't mean to keep talking about how hard it is, but it pulled me away from what was the closest to me when I was young. And yeah. From there I went on, and I've done everything. I played every style of music from top to bottom, pretty much. And I love that. But I kind of wish that I had stayed closer to who I am for all this time. And that's what I told this guy, a friend of mine who was asking for advice, you know. But it's not easy to do that. And here I am, and I'm super happy about this record. And, you know, I'm excited to, you know, to, I guess, really just enjoy the process, and then already looking on to the next one.
You know, it's interesting, you know, getting back to your roots, and when people do talk about jazz, you know, I think the thing that's great, I think the reason why jazz is full of such wonderful souls is that at the end of the day, the craft will continue to evolve, it will continue to stay, and it will get stronger. But everybody that gets into this knows at the end of the day, the chances of you becoming that level of musician that's going to make a lot of money is probably not pretty sky high. It just isn't going to happen. Yeah. You're going to do it out of love. And that's all there is to it. And I know that with what I'm doing. At the end of the day, this entire field is not full of the amount of money that you would get in other fields. It just isn't. So if you do it, you're doing it out of pure love. And there's something to be said about that. I think that's the irony of our society. We want baseball, football, basketball, hockey players to be in that boat to say, you know what, I'm going to do this because it's a children's sport. I think that's the thing that jazz has figured out. They're doing it because it's the music of your soul. It's the music of who you are and what you are and how you are. And if you get paid, fine. If you don't, you're not going to fold up and say, I'm not going to do it. Because there's a lot of people out there that wouldn't do that. But I find at jazz, they're doing it because they feel the music.
Yeah, I think that's true. And I think that's very true. And an ironic part of that is that a lot of the, I've had all my life, I've had people, say that, I talk about struggling economically or, the difficulties of being a musician. They say, yeah, but you love what you do. I don't. And they use it's almost a double-edged sword because it's almost used as a reason that we shouldn't make money. I've always wanted to be paid. I was, the way I started in music was as my mentor was a commercial trumpet player, right? He was a local guy, doing all the recording, and he'd been with Woody Herman and Stan Kenton and everybody, and he was making a living playing the trumpet. And that was my training. Here's what you need, Ben. It's a difficult world. And but we kind of just keep going, and we persist. But yeah, I always wanted to be paid. And so that's hurt my career in some ways also, because people, I don't want to go out and play in a club where 4 bands are playing a night and they're shuffling me and my, these great musicians on and off stage and not giving us any money and treating us badly. And, so I kind of found places where they would actually pay me, and they're more commercial situations. A lot of the more fun things maybe that weren't paying, well, kind of had to give that up. And I'm still in that place right now. I don't really want to go into a club where I'm not making any money,
Yeah.
And if I do, well, I pay my musicians out of my own pocket, right? Most of us do that, but I don't pay them $20. I'm going to pay them the wage they're supposed to get, and that makes it even harder to be out there. And which is one reason why I put so much effort into this record, and I do that with everything I do. This is a product that I spent a couple of years on and off doing this. It's something that can always be out there, and I can give it away, I can sell it, I can do whatever I want with it, but it's under my control. I like that.
Yeah, without a doubt. We've had the chance, I think, over this talk to really kind of traverse a lot of levels of your career and where you're at, how you feel about music. My question is this. Along with being in the classroom and along with educating and even being a musician, one of the greatest things that we learn is from seeing live shows. When you were younger, what live jazz did you see that left an impression on you?
Well, if you don't mind, I won't answer that exactly. I'll because it's actually the first thing that pops to mind is the blues.
Yeah,
like I was saying before. Do you mind if I tell you that one instead?
Yeah, no, that's perfect.
Like I mentioned, Andy Reese, the guitar player on the record, who I can't plug enough. What a wonderful guy and a great musician. And we grew up together from kindergarten. And he plays with a group called the Time Jumpers in Nashville. They're like a Western swing, the top Western swing band in the country. We went to the Fillmore, and they had very eclectic bills. Everybody knows that. They have jazz and blues together. I remember James Cotton and the Who and Magic Sam. And when we were first going, we sat down, and there was Buddy Guy Blues Band, and we didn't know who Buddy Guy was. We didn't know much about the blues. Man, this band, we always worked our way right up to the front row, sitting down on the floor. This band just hit it. They just hit it, and I had never heard anything like it. It just slammed me. And we were saying, who's Buddy Guy? Who's Buddy Guy? And they finished the first tune, and what happens? Out walks Buddy Guy. He wasn't even there yet. And he comes out with his guitar, and he just slammed it. And he's still slamming it. That was an incredible experience for me. And then from then on, I've heard everybody. In terms of a live jazz performance, I think I wouldn't even know. One doesn't pop to mind the same way that does. Isn't that funny?
Yeah, no, that's cool. That's a great answer. And that's really what I want, is really a formative show, and that's a perfect answer. So I guess I want to ask you this. I know you love the blues, but since we're in the purposes of this album and as being a jazz show, I want to know, why do you love jazz?
That's a big question, and I'm not sure. I think I keep taking your questions and answering them in maybe ways you don't intend. But jazz, and in the same way as blues, and I'm going to kind of lump together that also with Latin music, which these are like the three things that are me, that just are constantly in my head. And whenever I do anything, it's kind of a mixture of that is the first thing that's in my head. It's kind of who I am from the time I was 12 or 13 years old. It's what I listen to. It's me. If I'm going to sing something, I remember, I have a PhD in composition that I eventually got in my 50s. I was studying with top classical composers. I studied with John Corigliano, David Del Tredici, Tanya Leon. These are three of the hugest American composers. So I have that experience and that kind of training, and I studied theory intensely and all that. And yet, so I sat down at the piano. I wrote a piece for David Del Tredici when I was studying with him. It's like a 12-tone thing. And he's a rough guy, wonderful man, very opinionated and very outspoken. And he took hold of the music and he threw it down on the ground. And he says, nobody gives a shit about that. He says, it was in 3/4. He says, play me a waltz. So I sat down at the piano and I started improvising a waltz. And it was a jazz waltz. And he said, that's too jazzy. That's too jazzy. Play it straight, and I can't. That's not how I hear music. When I hear music, I hear swing. I hear a swing or I hear a clave. And if I have to write a piece, the first thing that's coming to mind is the blues progression. It's what's inside. It's who I am at this point. You do this for 50 years, it becomes you. It's how I hear music.
I have one more question for you. We've really covered a lot of things that I really wanted to cover, but I have one last question for you, and it's this. Everyone has a version of you. Everyone has a perception of who you are, your family, your friends, your fans, your students, but you know who you are. Tell me, who do you think you are?
Well, Joe, I'm a family man. I'm a loving person. Who probably the greatest joy I got out of life is raising my family, raising my three sons, and now being involved with my grandchildren. I think that's who I am, and my music is what I do. Like it's true with probably every single person you interview. It's a vocation, it's an avocation, it's a hobby, it's a passion. It's something that I'm working every day. As soon as we get off, I'm going to start practicing my trumpet. I'm just doing it all the time. I'd like to think I'm a good person trying to live a good life and be a loving, good person. That's how I like to think of myself.
Perfect. That's great. That's a great way to wrap everything up. Hey, man, thank you for taking a few minutes to talk to me about your life and music and beyond, man. It's been a pleasure.
Well, Joe, I really appreciate it. It's been a lot of fun talking to you. You have a great show. I have other friends like you, hard-working people, doing these interviews, doing blogging. It's a hard job. I bet you probably put in very long days, unless I miss my bed.
The thing is, it's all labor of love. It's just like you said. Whenever people come up to you, I've always kind of lived my life by that credo. At the end of the day, you got to do what you love, and I always feel like there's enough passion or love in this that it doesn't feel like work. It's just a part of who I am, an extension of what I love. So it's a pleasure, and I should thank you for making the music. It's the reason why I do this. So. Well,
that's great, and I really appreciate you helping me get it out there a little bit. And that's a real joy, and I'm super glad that you enjoyed the record. So thanks so much, Joe.
Thanks for listening and tuning in to yet another Neon Jazz interview, where we give you a bit of insight into the finest players in New York, Kansas City, and spots all over the world. And thanks to Ben for his time and his music. If you want to hear more interviews, go to Famous Interviews with Joe Domino on the iTunes Store. Visit neonjazz at youtube.com, and for everything all the time, go to the neonjazz.blogspot.com. Until next time, enjoy the jazz, my friends.
Neon Jazz.